I'm not talking about this brand today, I'm talking about the brand they ended up owning decades later. Maserati have been known for their crazy depreciation. Today I'm going to talk you through 5 cars that are depreciating insanely quickly, despite being pretty new, pretty exotic, and pretty fast. I'm super interested to see how far these cars drop in the next few years, but let's get straight into it. Do hit the like button if you want to see more videos like this, and subscribe as well if you're one of the 77% of people that aren't subscribed who is watching this video right now. But without further ado, let's get straight into it. The Maserati MC20 is the brand's first proper supercar to hit the road since the MC12, the spiritual predecessor to this car, and what's amazing about it is that it wasn't originally going to be a Maserati. It was first intended to be an Alfa Romeo instead, and obviously within Stellantis, or FCA at the time, they decided just before production to shift the car across to the Maserati brand instead, which opened the door for the special Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale. The 33 is still based on this general shell, though there are of course quite a few differences, although I will be real with you, not enough differences to make it worth £2.6 million, and that's coming from a major Alfa Romeo fan. The MC20 in comparison would have cost you around £228,000 brand new with no spec options back in 2021 adjusted for inflation, yet now just 3 years later they start at around £150,000, with many sitting at around the 160k mark. That means annual depreciation of around 11.4%, which is pretty huge for a supercar, and 34% total in 3 years, equating to £78,000 lost. That loss will have put you into a 3-litre twin turbocharged V6, which puts out 621 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 2.8 seconds, significantly faster than every other car on this list, and just generally ridiculously quick. That being said, outside of brand value, part of the reason why it might have depreciated is that it might not be as good as we first thought. Allegedly, it's 200 kilograms heavier than it was originally suggested by Maserati, and Car and Driver actually tested the 0 to 60 to be at 3.2 seconds instead. I've seen a few 0 to 60 tests by journalists, and they're almost all between 3.2 to 3.5 seconds, pretty interesting. I do, however, think it's absolutely stunning. Such a great looking supercar which you rarely see out on the roads, and in my opinion they deserve aggressive specs, with the interior being a more simple, clean place to be, with a healthy dose of Alcantara and the likes. And though the MC12 was a homologation special in order to enable Maserati to take part in sports car racing, the MC20 does still get a racing version, true to its history, the MC20 GT2, which is beautiful, and I expect to see Climbing the Hill as a modern classic at Goodwood in 30 years time. We're going from supercar onto super SUV now with the Maserati Levante Trofeo, the hottest SUV in the Maserati lineup, though it is actually slightly slower to 60 than the Gracale despite having a bigger and more powerful engine. It was named similarly to VW's after a famous wind, in this case the easterly wind that blows through the Mediterranean Sea and the south of France, which is pretty telling for what this car's purpose really is. It's supposed to be the kind of car you could cruise in luxury down the French Riviera feeling like a boss and enjoying the crazy power it offers. It sits on the same platform as cars like the Ghibli and Quattroporte and shares the same engine as the Trofeo examples, a 3.8-litre twin turbocharged V8 that produces 571 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4 seconds, which is more power than the Stelvio quad I recently drove, but slower to 60 by almost half a second. That engine is the F154 block, which you'll also find in other guises in a bunch of Ferraris, including the SF90, F8 Tributo and 488 to name a few, and yet despite that link to Ferrari, these are still not safe from depreciation. As the oldest car on the list, these have had 5 years to depreciate. They have depreciated by the most overall, 64.5%, or just under 13% per year. That's because, adjusted for inflation, they were £155,000 new back in 2019, whereas now you'll get them for £100,000 less than that, £55,000 at the bottom end, while many are findable for under £65,000 from around 2021. This car basically competes with KN Turbos, RSQ8 and Range Rover Sport SVRs, and though it does have quite a nice looking interior, one thing I found when I checked one out was how dated it looked in there compared to the MC20 for example. That being said, if you prefer some more analog features, it might be the right place for you, but I always imagine super SUV owners probably want max luxury and technology. They're known to handle very well and sound like absolute monsters. It's just a shame for people that bought them new that prices haven't held well, despite Maserati's efforts to reduce their self-fulfilling prophecy of depreciation. As I mentioned, the Maserati Ghibli sits on the same platform as the Levante, and the Trofeo again is the range topper from the most recent return of the Ghibli name badge. As an executive car, it competes with cars like the 5 Series and has been put up against the M5 in comparison reviews, in part because it's crazy powerful, but also because it will reach a top speed of 203 miles per hour. Genuinely insane to be doing in a car that has plummeted in price as much as this one has. That power comes from that same Ferrari F154 engine, the 3.8 litre twin turbocharged V8 block, which makes 571 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.2 seconds, 0.2 slower than the Levante, but mostly because it's rear wheel drive rather than all wheel drive. That engine is literally built at the Ferrari plant in Maranello, although to Maserati specifications rather than Ferrari's, and it sounds absolutely unreal, as with most V8 Maseratis, to be honest. In terms of depreciation, however, these would have cost you around £135,000 with no spec options adjusted for inflation 2 years ago, whereas now they start at around £73,000, meaning they've lost around £62,000 or just under 43% of their value. That means annual depreciation of almost 23%, which is absolutely insane, but wait until you see the next 2 cars on this list. Maybe it's simply the case that Maserati are pitching these cars too high on price to begin with, because reviews all typically say the same thing: lovely car but too expensive. So the depreciation we're seeing across the cars on this list might be in part a correction down to true values that people are willing to pay, and then a continuation of just typical depreciation after that. Either way, the car is a great M5 competitor despite a few parts coming from the Chrysler parts bin. It doesn't feel as aggressive as cars like the M5 and E63, it matches their performance but in a more wafty way, which explains why it's almost 2,000 kilograms with all the added sound deadening and the likes to keep it comfortable. Finish is similar to Levante, in fact the two interiors look pretty identical, with the carbon fibre center console and large central infotainment screen, and maybe a little bit too much plastic. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you are one of the 77% of people that aren't subscribed watching this video right now. And let me know in the comments down below, what is your personal favourite ever Maserati? There are some stunning classics, but my favourite has to be the MC12. Taking second on the list, we have our final Trofeo model, but also the quickest to 60, the Maserati Gracale Trofeo. This compact luxury crossover SUV was built on the same platform as the Alfa Romeo Stelvio that I drove recently, which is also the same platform as the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Like the Levante, it's named after a famous Mediterranean wind and was built to pander to the ever-increasing requirements for larger cars in today's society, offering the middle ground between a Ghibli and a Levante. What's most interesting though is that only the Trofeo comes as a non-electric model in any way. Every other Gracale is either a mild hybrid or a full electric example. That's because this got a 3 litre twin turbocharged V6 in the Tuno block, same as the MC20, putting out almost 100 brake horsepower less though at 522 brake horsepower, which gets to 60 in 3.7 seconds, pretty sick for a compact SUV. But the depreciation has been absolutely diabolical on them. Despite the Trofeo being the range topper, listed at around £101,000, they've dropped down as low as £77,000 in the space of just 1 year, and even worse, some brand new ones are being discounted before they leave the lot, down to around the £85,000 mark. That means annual depreciation of almost 24% or £24,000 lost total, which is a lot of money to lose in just 1 year. Again, that's probably because compared to its main rivals, it's way more expensive. Think of the X3M Competition, which is around 10k cheaper, or the F-Pace SVR, which is around 13k cheaper, or even the Stelvio Quad, which is around 15k cheaper. It's hard to really understand why the Gracale comes out so much higher. You could even go for a slightly slower Macan GTS for around 27k less, and you'd be getting a very well put together fast compact SUV with a London graduate salary left over. That being said, compared to the Ghibli and Levante, it has a slightly more modern interior, one that gets way more tech and looks like a lovely refresh with the new digital dash and new infotainment system. I personally much prefer the newer interior, except for the loss of the analog clock for a pretend analog clock, which I'm not sure was necessary. The car at number 1 on this list absolutely shocked me. I literally can't believe that the newest generation Maserati Granturismo has dropped in price by around 25.15% in the space of just 1 year. Brand new, this new flagship sports car would have cost you around £163,000 with no spec options, but now you can find them listed anywhere from around £122,000 with plenty available for around the 135k mark. Imagine losing £41,000 in just 1 year on a sports car like that. If any car makes the argument for Maserati putting their prices too high, it's this one, as even if we adjust the original 2007 example's price of £80,000 new for inflation, it would still be 30k cheaper than this second generation. It probably won't be long before these break the 100k mark in completely the wrong direction, especially when you consider that previous generation cars can be had anywhere from around £13,000, a car that of course has appeared in many previous cheap exotic car videos on this channel. And that older model came with a nice V8, whereas this new generation moderner comes with the Nettuno 3-litre twin turbocharged V6 block, which puts out 483 brake horsepower, the least power on this list, taking it to 60 in 3.8 seconds, meaning you'll get clapped by the Gracale, despite also being all-wheel drive, unlike the previous generation. It's a great looking car both outside and in, though it's no longer a Pininfarina design like the older gen, but in terms of performance it actually weighs less than the previous generation despite gaining all-wheel drive. That came down to lighter materials used in the build, which is a pretty good effort by Maserati. There was actually a pretty large gap between Granturismo generations, with the previous gen finishing in 2019 and this one arriving in 2023, and it sits on the same platform as cars like the Giulia, Stelvio and Gracale. Interiors are similar to what you'll find in the Gracale with this new Maserati design language, and of course as a Grand Tourer this would be my first pick for a long road trip around Europe from this list. I'm sure the MC20 would be cool, but nothing beats a Grand Tourer on a Grand Tour. And so there you have it, 5 of the fastest depreciating Maseratis you can actually get into right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. Thanks to you guys for watching, the patrons for their support, and if you want to see another video on some depreciated Porsches, then click on screen right here.